Yeah, it's a tough decision, and there's no perfect right answer, but I think you have to start with getting a couple of big things right and be really comfortable with a couple of big things. And the first thing is as to whether you're pursuing relative returns or absolute returns. If you're pursuing relative returns, it's fairly easy to make the decision and say, I need to be fully invested at all times because that's what I'm being paid to do. That's what I'm benchmarked against, and that's the world that I live in. If you're pursuing instead absolute returns, which is what I prefer and what I practice, it becomes a much more there's a much more of a range of decisions to be made there. So the way I look at it that way is that the decision to hold cash is essentially the default. So I hold cash as basically a placeholder while I'm looking for great investments. And really it's just a function of taking what the market gives me. So I can't go out and create my own opportunities, but I can certainly respond to what the market's offering. As part of responding to that opportunity, I have to do a certain amount of work. My process follows ways that I've talked about before, and it's fairly time intensive, and it's good old fashioned fundamental security analysis. So I can only come up with so many ideas in a given quarter or given year, and while I'm doing that, it's a natural default to hold cash rather than to put it somewhere else where I could potentially be taking principal risk. And as an absolute oriented investor, I never want to make an investment unless I'm comfortable across the range of probabilities that I'm considering that I'm going to make 15 to 20% a year on my investment. So a natural outcome of that, of course, is as markets go up and markets go down, your cash is going to fall inversely proportional to what the market's generally doing. And there's a wrinkle to that, which I'll get to. But people always say, well, it's market timing or it's speculation. And certainly, I mean, there's an implicit commentary about what the market is offering if you're holding an outsized portion of cash. And then I can describe what I consider outsized, but it's really not, what I think it's important to understand is I don't wake up in the morning and say, I need to have X% of my portfolio in cash. That's the last thing I do. I wake up every morning thinking I need to find great investments that are going to protect capital first, and second, compound it safely at an attractive rate. For me, the attractive rate is only 15 to 20% as a minimum, as a starting point. To the extent I can't find any investments that qualify for the latter, a safe 15 to 20% return, that's where the weighting component comes in. So yes, is that an element of market timing? Of course it is, because there's always something that's going to be better tomorrow potentially than it is today. It's not like I'm limited to today's opportunity set. I have a ticking clock on a fund that must be invested by year end, or there's a capital call that goes away or something. That's definitely not the case. But again, I think it's just important to decide, are you a relative investor or are you an absolute investor? If you're an absolute return-oriented investor, there's nothing wrong with holding cash. There are worse things than to be sitting on a decent pile of cash. So those are the first two decisions that I think you have to get right.